At night, the hum of dormant machines sounds like breathing. The walls here hold no warmth, and even the stainless steel seems to remember pain. Or 3 always felt colder than the rest, not in temperature necessarily, but in spirit, like it was waiting for something or someone. My name is Dr. Marcus Fell. I'm 54 years old and have been a trauma surgeon for 3 decades. I don't remember when I stopped counting the lives I saved. The lives I lost blur together too, though some faces return in dreams, or when I'm looking in the mirror too long. I don't sleep well. I don't eat well. I show up. I cut. I stitch. I go home. This is not a noble confession, just a tired one. 3 years ago they stopped scheduling regular cases in OR3. Budget cuts. It was only used when every other room was full. Otherwise it sat dark, locked, silent. But I started noticing things. Small things. At first, a light left on. A door not quite latched. The faint scent of antiseptic wafting stronger from its sealed cracks. I chalked it up to forgetfulness. We're all stretched thin here. Mistakes happen. Memory blurs. But then the monitor inside blinked one night. I was walking past after midnight, heading to the call room, when I saw it through the narrow window, the faint blue pulse of a vital screen, but no one was scheduled. I checked. I even pulled up the OR board. OR3 was marked offline. The next day it was dark again. No explanation, no entry in the maintenance logs. I didn't mention it to anyone. Weeks went by, the anomaly repeated. A faint hum from behind the locked door, a reflection of movement on the steel panel. Once I swore I saw someone standing at the table, not in scrubs, but in a hospital gown, pale, thin, unmoving. When I unlocked the door and stepped in, there was nothing, but the surgical tray had been laid out, carefully, scalpels aligned, gauze folded, clamps glinting, tools we hadn't used in years. I asked the night nurse if anyone had been using OR3. She looked confused. "It's closed, doctor. No one has the key but you and admin." I laughed it off, said maybe housekeeping left the door open by mistake, but her eyes stayed on me a second too long. The silence inside OR3 thickened as winter came. One evening, after a difficult case, I felt pulled to it. I can't explain why. Something unspoken, a tug below reason. The key turned easier than usual, like it had been used recently. Inside the lights were low but on. The table had been adjusted, head slightly raised. I stood in the doorway for a long time. Then I saw the gurney. It hadn't been there before. We don't store them in ORs. It was positioned in the center, exactly aligned with the overhead surgical light, which glowed faintly. A body lay beneath the sheet. I stepped closer, slowly. The air was ice cold though the vent above wasn't blowing. My breath hung visible in front of me. I reached for the sheet, my fingers shaking. Not from fear, I told myself. From exhaustion. The sheet rose slightly, before I touched it, as if something beneath it breathed. No, that couldn't be. I pulled it back. The man beneath was not dead, or at least, not entirely. His eyes were open, wide, unblinking, staring at me. I stepped back, heart thudding in my ears. His skin was gray, tinged with blue at the lips. His chest didn't move, yet there was the unmistakable sound of a heart monitor, slow, steady, beep, beep, beep. But there was no monitor connected. His hands were folded neatly over his chest, as though awaiting last rites. But the eyes, they didn't close. They followed me as I moved, left to right, side to side, tracking me. And then I remembered, I had seen that face, 10 years ago. He was a man in his 40s, routine appendectomy gone wrong, massive arterial bleed. We couldn't stop it. He coded on the table, OR3. My hands on his chest, blood spraying the walls. He died calling out for someone. I can't remember the name. I do remember how still he was after. So still, eyes wide, like he expected something else. We sent the body to pathology. His wife never showed up. The paperwork was signed. He became another number in the system, another quiet regret. I had forgotten him. Until now, he looked exactly the same. No decay, no smell, just waiting for what? Me. I stumbled back. The room spun. That same antiseptic stench filled my lungs, cloying, thick. My vision blurred, and I felt a wave of nausea. I reached for the wall to steady myself. When I looked again, the gurney was empty. The sheet lay folded. The tools on the tray were gone. The room was dark. My hand was on the door handle, though I didn't remember walking there. The hallway beyond was silent. No footsteps, no voices, just that soft rhythmic beep that followed me into the corridor, then stopped. Since that night, I haven't stepped into OR3 again. It's officially still closed. Admins moved on. They talk about repurposing it, turning it into storage, but every plan gets delayed. Every time someone tries to take inventory, their key doesn't work. Lights flicker, reports vanish. I still work the same hours, still walk the same halls, but now, sometimes I feel eyes on me from behind the surgery glass. I pass OR3, and the light is on, or off, but something is different. And then there's the breathing, soft, inhalation, exhalation, like a machine, but not quite, like lungs that never gave up. Some patients die in peace, some don't, some wait, and wait. I wonder how many more lie waiting, not in beds, but in our memories. The ones we let slip, the ones we weren't fast enough to save, the ones who look at us with those eyes, not angry, not vengeful, just unfinished. Some nights I wake up from dreams, where I'm the one on the table, or three above me, lights blinding, hands moving too slow, voices muffled, and a face peering down, looking at me the way I once looked at him, with regret. And then I realize I'm not breathing. I sit up in bed, gasping, clawing at my chest, but I always feel the sheet, cold, pulled tight across my ribs, waiting.
The operating room hums with a silence I've never trusted. It's the kind of silence that breathes between beeps, a quiet held tightly between metal and skin. I've always felt it lurking, something waiting, unnoticed, in that sterile hush. The lights above cast a pure, harsh glow, but even they can't banish everything. My name is Dr. Elena Marquez. I'm 42 years old, and I've been a hand surgeon for nearly 2 decades. Tendons, nerves, bones. I know them better than most people know their friends. I've rebuilt crushed knuckles, restored movement to frozen digits, but I've never stopped thinking about one patient and one hand that refused to return. His name was Daniel, 26, healthy, strong. A woodworking accident severed his flexor tendons, and he came in calm, if slightly embarrassed. We spoke about the surgery, the recovery plan, and he even joked about turning to pottery instead. It was all routine, the sort of case I'd done in my sleep. The operation went flawlessly. The tendons were reattached, nerves left untouched. I closed the incisions neatly. I even admired my own sutures. He was expected to begin finger movement within days, but when the bandages came off, his hand lay still. No inflammation, no nerve damage, nothing wrong mechanically. It just didn't move. Daniel was calm at first. He said he could feel his hand, could sense pressure when we tested it. He said it didn't hurt, but when I asked him to lift a finger, he stared at it like it didn't belong to him. After a while, he said something that made my skin prickle. I think it's deciding. Deciding what? if it wants to come back. I smiled the way doctors are trained to smile when a patient says something strange, but harmless. But there was something in his eyes, not confusion, something colder. We tested him again. EMG showed perfect nerve conduction. We sent him for a second opinion, another. All of them agreed. There was no physical reason for the paralysis. The therapists began work, slowly trying to coax motion, but he stopped attending. At his next follow-up, he told me he had dreams where the hand moved fine, writing, gripping tools, brushing his hair. He said it would always stop the moment he woke up, like it had caught him watching. I think it's angry, he said once. I asked him what he meant. Something's living in it, he said. Not like an infection, something that doesn't want to leave. That was the last time he came in. We reported the withdrawal, followed protocol. The file went cold. 6 months passed, and I thought of him only sometimes. Late at night, when my own hands ached with fatigue, or when I passed a woodworking shop on my way home. Then, nearly a year after I last saw him, a package arrived at the front desk. No return address, just my name, handwritten, shaky. Inside was a small hand-carved wooden box, and a letter. It was from Daniel's mother. She said he had taken his life 3 weeks ago. In his final days, he became reclusive, quiet. He stopped speaking of his hand entirely. The doctors thought he was improving, but they were wrong. He left no note, only the box, with instructions to send it to me. I opened it slowly. Inside was a wooden sculpture of a right hand, palm outward, fingers slightly curled, so detailed. The wrinkles, the veins, even the shallow scar I remembered from the surgery, was carved in. Beneath it was a slip of folded paper. Maybe now, it read, "It'll move." I didn't cry, not then. I held the wooden hand, light as a bird, in my palm, and felt something I couldn't name. Guilt, maybe, or something colder. That night I dreamed I was in the OR, the lights above flickering. I turned to scrub, and there it was, his carved hand resting on the table, except it was flesh, real, still. I keep it in my office now, tucked inside a drawer I rarely open. Some days I swear it shifts a little. Once I came in early, and the drawer was cracked open. I thought I'd imagined it, but when I sat down, I noticed the hand was turned slightly to the left, as if it had been trying to see me. I don't tell my colleagues. They already think I work too late, that I spend too much time alone with ghosts of cases past, and maybe I do. I've taken on dozens of patients since, repaired shattered wrists, reattached fingers, stitched nerves like silk, but sometimes when I scrub in, my fingers feel stiff, like something is holding them, guiding them. On especially long days, I start to feel like I'm not healing hands anymore. I'm listening to them. They speak in tremors, in hesitations, and sometimes in silence. Daniel's hand, real or carved, never spoke, but I've come to understand it anyway. It was never about pain or nerve signals. It was about being occupied, about some part of him becoming unreachable, colonized by sorrow, maybe, or by something more ancient than grief. And in a way, I wonder if that's how it starts, in the silence between pulses, the moment a patient forgets the name of a part of themselves, or when a hand won't move, not because it's broken, but because it remembers something it cannot say. Now, when I look at my hands before a procedure, I ask myself if I'm whole, if all of me still answers when called, if there's any part that has gone quiet, unnoticed. So far the answer is yes, but sometimes it takes longer than I'd like. And when I reach for the tools, I do it carefully, because I know now, not every hand is empty, not every silence is benign, And not every stillness is just the body resting. Some of them are waiting. Some of them have decided not to come back. And some never left.
The mirrors in the surgical locker room are long and narrow, lined up like sentinels across the far wall. There's something about them I've always disliked. Maybe it's the way they reflect too much. Not just faces or movements, but something deeper, harder to ignore when you're alone with it. Reflections seem to hold on to things longer than they should, as if the mirror remembers more than it shows. My name is Dr. Harris Quinn. I'm 53, Chief of Trauma Surgery. I've handled injuries that would make most people look away. Car crashes, gunshots, industrial accidents, human bodies torn into jigsaw pieces, and I always put them back together. I was proud of that, still am, mostly. But a few years ago, I began to see something I couldn't fix, something no amount of training or scalpel precision could remove. It started in the mirror, not the one at home, or in my car, or even in the OR, just the one in the locker room. It was late, past midnight. I'd finished a 6-hour case, a liver laceration and bowel perforation, and I was washing up, waiting for the water to run clear, tarp out of habit, and caught my own reflection. For a moment, I didn't recognize myself, not because of fatigue or shock, or even age, but because the man in the mirror was still scrubbing, long after I'd stopped. I blinked. He blinked back, and it was gone. I told myself it was exhaustion, that maybe I'd micro-slept, even on my feet. The mind plays tricks, especially in places where the lighting never changes, and the air feels vacuum-sealed. But from then on, I began to check that mirror after every shift, and it began to happen more often. Subtle things at first, the movement delayed by half a second, a blink that didn't sync, a breath fogging the glass when I hadn't exhaled. It never happened anywhere else. Only there, only that mirror. Then it escalated. One night, I was putting away my scalpel kit. I thought I was alone, to turn to wash my hands and glanced up. My reflection had already turned. It was facing me, smiling. I froze. The smile was small, quiet, but wrong. Not joyous, not even sinister, just knowing. Like it understood something I didn't. It held the scalpel still in its gloved hand, even though mine was empty. I didn't move for a full minute. Then, as if catching up to itself, the reflection corrected. A second later, it matched me again. I stopped using that mirror. I started locking my locker without looking up. I used the staff bathroom down the hall to wash up, but I still passed the mirror sometimes, and every so often, I'd catch something at the edge of my vision. That cruel knowing curve of a mouth, a scalpel held too tightly, a flicker of movement that didn't belong to me. I didn't talk to anyone. Who could I tell that the mirror was watching me back? That I'd begun to feel it thinking. Instead, I threw myself into the work even harder. I volunteered for cases no one wanted. Long surgeries, bloody ones. I thought maybe if I stayed too busy to look into a mirror, it would go away, that it would get tired of waiting. Then came the patient, 34, female, stab wound to the lower abdomen, left side. She came in screaming, bleeding badly. The blade had missed her organs by sheer luck, but she was terrified. Her eyes locked on mine as I stood over her in the OR, and she said something that chilled me in a way no injury ever had. He's still in the mirror. I leaned in. What mirror? The locker room, she whispered, voice raw. He smiled at me. I didn't reply. I couldn't. We saved her. Textbook procedure. But I watched her as she was wheeled out, her eyes still wide and locked on the ceiling, like she expected something to crawl out of it. That night, I returned to the locker room. Alone, late. I told myself it was to confront it. Whatever it was, I stood in front of the mirror, arms at my side,
The lights buzzed faintly above me, casting a yellowish hue across the tiles. I stared. It stared back. I raised my hand slowly. It copied me, perfectly. I tilted my head. It followed. Normal, just me. Then it blinked, before I did, and the smile returned. It lifted its hand, still gloved, still holding a scalpel I hadn't carried that day. It raised the blade slowly to its throat, and drew a thin red line across the neck. I staggered back. My own throat burned with the phantom of it. But the reflection just smiled wider, then dropped the scalpel. Blood, impossibly, began to trickle down the mirrors inside, like the glass itself was bleeding. I turned and left. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the mirror was spotless. No blood, no cracks, but there was a smudge on the glass where the scalpel had hovered, a single fingerprint, pressed deep. I took a leave of absence soon after. The board cited exhaustion. I didn't argue. I needed out, and for a time it helped. I walked near the sea, watched the sun rise and fall like clockwork. I stayed in small rooms with no mirrors. I let the quiet fill the parts of me I'd ignored for too long. But mirrors don't forget. A few weeks ago, I passed by a glass door at a restaurant, just a glimpse. But in that moment, I saw him again. Me but not me. Just watching, waiting. The reflection smiled and raised an empty hand. It didn't need the scalpel anymore. It had patience. I've stopped trusting reflections. I've removed or covered every mirror in my home. My bathroom cabinet is taped shut. The windows at night reflect too much, so I keep the lights low. Sometimes I feel the scalpel in my hand again, though I haven't picked one up in months. My fingers twitch in my sleep. I wake with faint cuts across my palms, pink and thin like whispers of something sharpening beneath my skin. I don't know what it wants. I don't know if it's me, or what's left behind after too many surgeries. Maybe every cut left an echo, and now something in the mirror has been listening. But I know this: mirrors are not passive. They observe, they wait, and sometimes, if you stare long enough, they show you not who you are, but
the operating theater at 3 a.m. feels like a mausoleum, dressed in fluorescent light. It doesn't matter how new the machines are, how crisp the air conditioning, or how brightly the steel glints under sterile bulbs. At that hour, time itself stops moving. Sounds become sharp. Every hiss from a monitor, every faint hum of electricity seems to echo as if the walls are listening. I'm Dr. Lena Harrow. I'm 42, a trauma surgeon for the past 17 years, and I've spent more nights in the OR than in my own bed. I used to love the silence of surgery, the calm clarity that comes when everything else in life falls away. But that night, everything felt wrong. I hadn't noticed how much I'd changed until the silence no longer soothed me. We were midway through a difficult emergency procedure. The man in his 60s had come in after a massive cardiac rupture. There wasn't time for hesitation. It was a race against death. But we were trained for this: hands steady, mind sharp. And yet, I remember feeling strange the moment I opened his chest. Not fear, exactly, but an unbearable sense that we were intruding somewhere we didn't belong. The others didn't seem to feel it. My resident, Malik, was focused on the blood flow, suctioning with smooth, efficient movements. The anesthesiologist kept her eyes glued to the monitor, adjusting levels in mechanical silence. But for me, it was like something cold reached through the open sternum and touched my ribs. My gloved hands trembled once, almost imperceptibly. I told myself it was the lack of sleep. As we worked, I noticed something odd. The heart looked fine, too fine. There was no tear, no visible damage. We had cut him open for nothing. I felt a flush of shame. Had I misdiagnosed? I looked to Malik, about to speak, When I saw something flicker in the reflection of the overhead light, I paused, looked again. There it was, a brief shimmer of movement that wasn't ours. There was a mirror panel above the surgical table. It's not standard in most ORs, but ours had one installed during a renovation. Something about improved visibility for teaching. In that mirror, I saw the room, as it was, but not exactly. The layout was the same, but something was off. Subtle shifts in positioning. The scrub nurse, who had just stepped out, was still standing at the tray in the reflection. She wasn't moving. I blinked, focused back on the chest. The man's heart began to twitch erratically. Still, no structural cause. I reached deeper with the retractor, and I swear I felt resistance. Not physical, but like pushing through something intangible. My fingers touched the heart again, and then I heard it. Not through my ears, somewhere deeper. A whispering murmur, just beneath the threshold of sound. Not words, but the shape of them. It was coming from the open chest cavity. I froze, scalpel hovering. Malik asked something. I don't remember what. I looked up again at the mirror. Now we were all there, frozen in reflection. Me, Malik, the anesthesiologist, the nurse, standing perfectly still. But I wasn't holding the scalpel in the reflection. My hands were empty, and my face, it wasn't right. It was looking at me. I dropped the scalpel. It clanged against the tray, and everyone startled. I mumbled something about fatigue, motioned for Malik to continue suturing, but my eyes never left the mirror. The reflection was moving now, but not like us. It lagged slightly, reacting a second too late, like watching a delayed broadcast. Then it started to shift faster than us. By the time I turned to ask Malik something, the mirror version had already done it. Lips moving soundlessly, face twitching into a smile I hadn't made. I told them to cover the chest. I claimed we had stabilized him, which wasn't true, but I needed that chest closed. The second Malik began stitching, the whispering faded. We rolled the man into recovery. He flatlined 3 hours later. No cause was ever found. Cardiac tissue was healthy. No clots, no arrhythmia. The body just gave up. Later I returned to the OR to retrieve my notes. The room was dark. The mirror still hung there, heavy and silent. I stared into it for a long time. I wanted to believe it had been a trick of the light, or exhaustion, but I knew better. In the mirror, I wasn't alone. She was still there, me, but not, wearing the same gown, same mask, same blood-specked gloves, but her hands were folded neatly. She wasn't reflecting, she was waiting. I turned away. The next few weeks passed in a fog. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the open chest, not just the patients but others, corpses from old surgeries, people I'd saved, people I hadn't, and beneath their ribs, always the same murmur, always the whispering. I requested to transfer to general surgery, less trauma, fewer emergencies, but it didn't help. Even with routine procedures, I'd glance up mid-operation and see something wrong in the overhead reflection. Not every time, just often enough that I began documenting them. 57 instances in 3 months, slight delays, wrong angles, expressions that didn't match mine. Once, I looked up and saw the mirror me, walking away while I stood still, paralyzed. I never told anyone. What would I say? That I was being haunted by a reflection, that I could hear whispering from inside human bodies. They'd remove my license. Worse, they'd pity me. The last straw was a child, 8 years old, routine appendectomy. Everything went smoothly, but when I looked at the mirror during closing, I saw her chest still open, even though I'd just sutured the final stitch, and inside it, not blood, not organs, just a void, a deep, endless black. I resigned the next day. Now I teach. I keep scalpels in drawers, unopened,
I haven't entered an OR in over a year, but I still see it in dreams. The open chest, the whispers, the mirror. Sometimes I wake up at night, and I'm not sure if I'm really in my bed, or still standing in that cold white room. Sometimes I look into the mirror in my hallway, and I see myself, waiting, hands folded neatly, face smiling just a little too soon. There's something inside us that we weren't meant to see, something that stirs when the body is opened, and the soul doesn't quite leave. Not every chest you close stays closed. Some remain open, forever, and some of us are still inside.
I first noticed the noise on a Tuesday night. It was subtle, like the faint rustle of paper or the whisper of wind through leaves. At first, I dismissed it as the house settling, or perhaps the old ventilation system groaning under the weight of years. But, as the nights wore on, the sound persisted, growing more distinct, more intentional. I live alone, in a modest 2-story house on the outskirts of town. It's an old place, with creaky floorboards and walls that seem to breathe in the silence. I moved here seeking solitude, a refuge from the cacophony of city life. But lately the silence has become oppressive, filled with unseen presences and unheard voices. The vent in my bedroom is old and rusty, its slats bent and warped. It's positioned high on the wall, near the ceiling, and I often find myself staring at it, drawn by an inexplicable compulsion. The noise seems to emanate from there, a soft rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on metal. One night, unable to sleep, I stood on a chair to get a closer look. Peering into the darkness beyond the slats, I saw nothing but shadows. Yet, the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. It was as if something, or someone, was lurking just beyond sight, observing me through the veil of darkness. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps rodents had found their way into the ductwork, or maybe it was just the wind playing tricks. But deep down, I knew better. The sensation was too precise, too focused. It wasn't the aimless scurrying of animals or the random creaks of an old house. It was deliberate, calculated. As days turned into weeks, the occurrences intensified. I began to hear whispers, faint, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to echo from the vent. They were always just beyond comprehension, like a language I once knew but had long forgotten. The whispers would rise and fall, sometimes urgent, sometimes soothing, but always present. Sleep became elusive. I would lie awake for hours, staring at the vent, waiting for the next sound, the next whisper. My dreams, when they came, were filled with dark corridors and unseen watchers. I would wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, the whispers still echoing in my ears. I confided in a friend, hoping to find some solace or explanation. He suggested I have the vents cleaned, perhaps even sealed off. Taking his advice, I called a professional to inspect the system. The technician, a burly man with a thick beard, spent hours examining the ducts. He found nothing unusual, no signs of pests, no structural issues. He assured me the system was sound. That night, the whispers returned, louder than before. They seemed agitated, almost angry. The tapping became more insistent, a staccato rhythm that echoed through the room. I felt a cold draft emanating from the vent, chilling me to the bone. Determined to confront whatever was haunting me, I removed the vent cover. Armed with a flashlight, I peered into the darkness. The beam illuminated the narrow duct, revealing dust-covered walls and cobwebs. But as I moved the light further in, I caught a glimpse of something, a fleeting shadow, a glint of eyes reflecting the light. I stumbled back, heart racing, the flashlight clattering to the floor. The image burned into my mind,
eyes human-like yet devoid of emotion, staring back at me from the darkness. I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, a trick of the light, but the feeling of being watched persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. I began to notice other signs, objects slightly out of place, doors ajar that I was sure I'd closed, the faint scent of something unfamiliar in the air. My mental state deteriorated. I became paranoid, jumpy at every sound. Friends noticed the change, expressing concern, but I brushed them off. How could I explain the unexplainable? How could I make them understand the terror that gripped me every night? Desperate, I set up a camera aimed at the vent, hoping to capture evidence of the intruder. I reviewed hours of footage, finding nothing but static and shadows. But one night, as I fast-forwarded through the recording, I saw it, a brief moment where the vent cover moved slightly, as if nudged from the inside. I paused the video, rewound, and played it again. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Something was inside the vent. I contacted the authorities, explaining my suspicions. They conducted a thorough search, finding no evidence of an intruder. They suggested I seek professional help, implying that my experiences were the result of stress or mental illness. Feeling isolated and desperate, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I purchased tools and began dismantling the ventilation system, determined to uncover the truth. As I removed sections of ductwork, I found nothing unusual until I reached the section behind my bedroom wall. There, nestled within the narrow space, was a small compartment. Inside, I found remnants of food wrappers, a tattered blanket, and a notebook filled with incoherent scribbles and drawings. The pages were filled with eyes, all staring, all watching. My blood ran cold. Someone had been living inside my walls, observing me through the vent. The realization was both horrifying and oddly relieving. At least now, I had an explanation. I handed the evidence over to the police, who launched an investigation. They discovered a hidden entrance in the basement, leading to the crawl space behind the walls. However, the intruder was never found. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. In the aftermath, I tried to rebuild my life. I repaired the walls, sealed the vents, and installed security systems. But the sense of unease never left me. At night, I still feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me, the whispers echoing in my mind. I don't know if the watcher is gone, or if they ever truly existed. Perhaps they were a manifestation of my own fears, a projection of my loneliness, or perhaps they are still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to return. All I know is that the vent remains, a silent sentinel in my room, a reminder of the unseen horrors that can dwell just beyond our perception. And every night, as I lie in bed, I can't help but glance at it, half expecting to see those eyes staring back at me once more.